So if you show me the business you are turning away, I can tell you the health of your financial practice, period. It's a line that makes people, well, a little uncomfortable, and it should, because it cuts through the truth about the maturity and the discipline of a firm, especially one that lives and dies by relationships. When you're young in the business, you say yes to just about anything that moves. If someone can fog a mirror, they can qualify as a client. You convince yourself that success means adding, not filtering. You think volume equals progress. And to be fair, at the start, maybe it does. You need the experience. You need to survive. You need the at-bats. You need the reps. But you need to learn, as Mike Tyson famously said, how to get punched in the mouth. But there comes a point when saying yes to everyone and everything is the very thing that limits your growth, not just financially, but professionally, emotionally, culturally. Because the real strength of a firm isn't measured by how much business you bring in. It's measured by the business you have the courage to actually walk away from. So a little while ago, I was referred to a prospective client, great guy, successful, kind. We had a few conversations that I actually really enjoyed, but as I listened more closely, I started to notice a little bit of a pattern in the conversation, in our talks. Every single one seemed to circle back to performance in some way, shape, or form. What do you expect the portfolio to do over time? How often do you beat the market? What do you do when the market goes down? How do you maneuver? All fair questions, maybe not the most productive questions, but fair. But these kinds of questions, they reveal a need for control. He wanted certainty. And I knew right then there is no such thing for him in equity investing. There is no certainty. And after one of our last calls, I sent him this email. He had a few questions about performance. And here's part of it. The long-term average return, it's true, of the equity markets is about 10% per year over long periods. Given how we invest, my expectation is that net of our costs, we have every opportunity to achieve that over the long term. Is it guaranteed? No, not in the least. The much bigger issue, though, and the one that matters far more than performance or cost, is behavior. If we invest tomorrow and the portfolio declines, say by a third over the course of the year, it's critical that you stay invested. And with my help, that's exactly what we'll do. Market declines of that size happen on average every 5 or 6 years. There's nothing unusual about them. My job above all else is to stand between you and that kind of mistake. And if you're unsure at all about your ability to stay the course through those declines, we should absolutely pause and talk through it before moving forward. Now, he got back to me politely, but even in our next conversation, though he said he understood, he kept circling back to performance and protection, all around the thing that he couldn't have, which is certainty. So I told him directly, I said, hey, look, I've really enjoyed our conversations. I don't think that we could have a productive relationship together. This is not going to work. And you're looking for a place where you can somehow avoid the discomfort that the downturns bring. And that's not us. That place actually doesn't exist in the equity markets. He thanked me, not because he necessarily liked what I said, but because I was honest. And that moment reminded me of Greek mythology in the story of Odysseus, and how he had his men plug their ears with beeswax, and he himself tied himself to the mast of his ship so he could hear the siren song without steering his ship into the rocks. He knew the song would be beautiful, soothing, irresistible, but also deadly. And that's what certainty is in our profession. It's the siren song, the illusion that you can have safety in a place that only rewards courage. And if you start chasing that song, if you start telling people what they really want to hear instead of what they need to hear, well, you'll wreck your ship. And however much I'd love to tell you that I have always lived by that conviction, it's simply not true. Around 2014 or 15, I took on a client that I really shouldn't have. I saw the signs early that she wasn't built for the ride that is equity investing. And subsequently, every minor correction made her uneasy. Every headline seemed to rattle her. She was a very successful Boston area business owner. And maybe I had just convinced myself that she'd be fine with my help. And every time the market dipped, though, she'd call me nervous, asking how long it might last. And I'd talk her off the ledge every time. And for 5 years or so, it worked. She'd calm down. She'd stay the course. And the market would recover. And I told myself that, all right, well, I'm doing a good job here, good coaching. Then the pandemic hit, 2020. The market fell like a stone over the course of about 3 or 4 weeks. Fear took over. I still remember her voice, sort of panicked. Ben, I can't go through another 2008 and 2009. Everything I'm hearing says that this time is different. We've never seen something like this before, and I don't have the years to recover. She wanted out, and she wanted out completely. In so many words, I told her no, and that this was temporary, though I don't know how long nor how far the economy or the markets would fall before they start recovering, but that it would recover. But she'd already made up her mind. She sold everything near the bottom, about a 37% decline. Right before, literally right before the market turned around and ripped about 80 to 90% higher over the next 9 months. That was one of the hardest lessons of my career, because while anyone could argue that she made that decision herself, I'd be lying to say that it wasn't my failure. I saw the signs 5 years earlier. I ignored them. I told myself I could coach her through them. I convinced myself I was good enough to fix the wiring, but I couldn't. And that's why I'm more vigilant now. That's why I'm blunt in my conversations, my emails, my meetings. Sugarcoating volatility or downplaying risk doesn't work. The only way you can earn the premium, the full premium, what equities offer, is by being willing to sit through the frequent but temporary declines that, yeah, they test your faith. You can't separate the two, though. The decline is the toll. That's the part of the business nobody wants to talk about. Everyone wants the 10% annual return. Nobody wants the 37% drawdown that precedes it. Everyone wants to say they're long-term investors until long-term means next Tuesday. So when I talk about the health of a practice, I'm not talking about AUM or revenue or new accounts. I'm talking about standards. Standards. And the ability to look somebody in the eye and say, you're not ready for this. About the willingness to say no to a relationship that doesn't fit your philosophy, even if it's a big one, right? Even if it looks great on paper. Because every time you say yes to the wrong person, you're saying no to your culture. You're saying no to your standards. Or you're saying you don't have standards. Even worse. I'd rather have a smaller practice filled with conviction than a larger one filled with compromise. I'd rather be tied to the mast like Odysseus, fighting the noise, than let the siren song of certainty pull me in and my team in into false promises. Well, that's the job. It's conviction management. And if you've been at this long enough, you've done your own version of my story from 2015. The client you took because you liked them. You needed the business. They wore you down. The one that called in fear every time the market moved an inch. The one ultimately you knew you couldn't save. And it took a few years to show you that. Those scars matter. They're reminders. They're actually tuition. So here's the challenge for this week. Well, forever. Be honest with yourself. Is there someone in your pipeline or already within your practice who gives you sort of that uneasy feeling you're trying to ignore? That little voice that says, I don't know if this one's going to be able to make it through the next storm. Not quite sure. If so, address it now before the storm hits, because it's not your job to make everyone an equity investor. It's your job to make sure the people who choose this path understand the price of admission, not once, but over and over and over again. The sirens, they will sing. They will continue to sing. The headlines will always scream. The world will always feel like it's ending. But that's the toll that you pay for greatness and for peace, by the way. That's how you build a practice with integrity. That's how you build a team with conviction. And that's how we live, with relentless abandon. Everybody have a fantastic, fantastic week.